Hi, welcome to Wandering into the Woods, a podcast brought to you by the creators of Adventures with BG. I'm Linda.
And this is Jarrett.
And did you know that Texas is home to indigenous pictographs? I sure didn't. And today, Jared and I are going to talk to you about our adventure out in West Texas to see some of these indigenous pictographs out in here in West Texas.
Where specifically, Linda?
It was in Seminole Canyon State Park, and we'll make sure to give you all the details so that you know what to expect when you go and visit. Now, I'm going to be totally ripping off Wikipedia these next couple of minutes, but I do think that the Wikipedia page for Seminole Canyon State Park and Historic Site has a great overview of the site and what it offers. So definitely a great site in case you're curious and trying to consider an adventure out there, which we totally recommend. Keep in mind, Jared's trajectory and mine so far was that we went out to X-Bar Ranch and we needed to get from X-Bar Ranch out into Marfa. And so we still really wanted to see the pictographs and visit Seminole Canyon State Park. So what we did was we took a detour between X-Bar and Marfa and went, was it southwest, Jarrett? Was it 2.5 southwest?
I don't know. It's south.
Yeah, we took a 2.5 hour trip south into to Seminole Canyon State Park, and then we after leaving we went out to Marfa, and I don't remember how long it was from there to Marfa.
I don't know.
Yeah, so it was a long day, but well worth it. I really recommend it. And but here's a brief overview. The Seminole Canyon State Park and Historic Site is located off U.S. Route 90. It is east of the Pecos River High Bridge near the Rio Grande. It allows camping, biking, birdwatching, backpacking, and obviously with permits and everything, archaeological study. There is cave art and archaeological artifacts that have been found there dating back to the earliest human habitation in the area. The park is part of the larger Seminole Canyon Archaeological District on the National Register of Historic Places. And really, to give you a brief history, it's currently being operated by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and there is some indigenous art there that indicates that these people that the site has been occupied for at least about 2,000 to 8,000 years ago. It's a broad range, but definitely people have been around as far as Texas is concerned. They've been in the Seminole Canyon State Park area for a while.
So Seminole Canyon State Park actually has 3 different tours. They have the Fate Bell Shelter Tour, which is the one we took. They have the Presa Day Hike, which takes you out to more remote areas and into the Presa Canyon. And they have an Upper Canyon hike where you go through the park's railroad and military history. They also have another one. I don't know how often it occurs because it's by boat. So there's the Panther Cave pictograph site, and it's only done by a private boat company, but it is state park land. So it all depends on how much water and how much flow is in the Rio Grande at the time.
And how much time you have as well, I would venture to guess.
So for the Fate Bell tour, you take a short hike. They say it's rugged, but it wasn't too bad, honestly. But I mean, if you are in a wheelchair or something, it's not something you're going to be able to do. But short hike, about half a mile down to the bell itself in the summer months. So September 15th to May 15th, May 16th to September 14th. They only have one tour. It's from Wednesday to Sundays at 10 a.m. Then in the cooler months, September 15th to May 15th, there are Wednesday to Sunday, 10 a.m., and then another 3 p.m. So obviously they don't do a second tour in the very hot hours of the summer months.
Yeah, and I think you and we did a summer tour, and even at 10 a.m., it felt really hot.
Yeah.
And you did say it felt pretty easy for you to do that hike. You're an experienced hiker and you're in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
I did see some people struggle.
Yeah.
It depends on, if you're a fit person, it's definitely easy for you to get to the Fate Bell Shelter. But Um,
Well, getting there is probably fairly easy because it's downhill.
yeah, but coming back.
Yeah.
So, just keep that in mind that, you do need, yeah, some level of fitness.
Mhm. And so you are going into a canyon, which means that there's quite a bit of elevation change. So
Right.
that's the big thing. It's out, it's exposed, there's no shade until you get into the Fate Bell shelter itself. So it will be hot if it's hot, or if it's windy, it's going to be super windy out there. So it's,
Yeah, I don't think they admit, like, food either. We had our water packs, didn't we?
yeah,
They
we had
do
water,
recommend you take water,
definitely.
and we agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
So,
So the tour itself starts behind the headquarters at the overlook area where you can see the canyon. And not to be neglected, and we'll talk about it at the end,
mhm.
but there is a museum of the history of the canyon
It's a
inside.
pretty great museum.
Yeah,
It's on par with the, national park museums,
small and concise, but it's got a lot of good information in there
for
regarding the
sure.
history. And then as you start your tour, they'll get everyone together. You'll start your walk down. One of the first things that you'll see is a statue made of some sort of bronze. It's a bronze sculpture.
Hold on. Before you get to the sculpture, remember there's a great overlook.
Yeah, I said that you meet at the overlook at the back.
Yeah, but you didn't mention how great it
It's
is.
very good. And if you bring quarters, I guess you can use those old timey like telescope things with quarters.
For sure. So we really, just I think for overview, especially if you're visiting during the summer, you want to get there at 10 a.m. Like, in time for the meeting or the meeting place at the overlook, um, just so that you get a good view of the place. And then after you do the tour outside, you can come inside and look at the facilities inside the museum.
Yeah. So starting your tour, the first thing you're going to see is the Maker of Peace, which is a bronze statue created by Bill Worley. It is not anything specific. He didn't design it based on anything. He just took a lot of the motifs that you see in the art and combined them. So
And yet it is awesome.
yeah, so it may not look like anything when you first start, but when you come back, you'll notice a lot of the things and the aspects of it. So, like the head and the noddle, which is a spear chunking device, and just general like shamanness to it.
It definitely adds context and it makes you appreciate it more.
Hmm.
But just I don't know. I'm not a great uh knowledgeable person when it comes to art, but you can appreciate that this is a pretty amazing piece to have out there in this state park.
Yeah. And then as you walk down, you'll probably stop a couple of times and get some history on the indigenous individuals that would have been making the art. Specifically, you talk kind of about some of the vegetation that they would have used, which is agave and sotol. So apparently, they were a large sotol society.
Yeah, there were limited food resources in the area just because it's a very desert-like environment. Even back then, when the Rio Grande was flowing with more water than it currently is, and the resources were so limited that a lot of the times the indigenous societies or family groups, really, you find out at the museum, these units had to like subsist mostly of sodal, which is a very sugary plant
Yeah.
and, essentially, like, they developed a way to, um I don't like, basically, like, bake it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they bake it.
yeah, they'd bake it, and it provided, a good amount of carbohydrates for them. They, had a lot of, have found a lot through archaeological digs, have found that they had a lot of tooth issues because of the amount of sugar that's in Sotol. So
Mm.
that was just really interesting for me to find, also to find out how diverse Soulsville is, that you can make so many things from it, including, like a very, in my opinion, a pretty decent alcoholic beverage, but it has many great uses.
Yeah. So you'll get a lot of that history, or a little base history, some of the vegetation as you go down. You'll finish your half mile or so, and then you'll come upon the Fate Belt Annex. So it's not the actual shelter itself. You'll see a large rock wall. You'll take some stairs up to some other pictographs. And so it's kind of like a pregame where they walk you through some of the art And this when you're out on the canyon, you look up at this great big wall. They've got some very large art that you can see. It might not be bad to bring binoculars because some of it's that large, multiple feet tall, so you can get a good look. It may not be bad to have binoculars just to look at some of the cave art because you can't get right up against it. They want to protect it, so they keep you kind of far away. And as far as the cave art goes, there are four colors. Linda, do you remember what they are?
Oh man, I was not expecting this quiz. I don't. And also I need clarification. When you're talking about the cave art, are you referring you're still talking about the in the annex, right?
Just all of it in general.
Okay. Um so the answer is no, I don't remember
Okay.
off the top of my head the
If
four
I
colors.
remember correctly, there's white,
Mhm.
a gold, a red, and black.
Wasn't it more of an orangey, not really
It's
gold?
like a gold,
Yeah.
orange. I mean, same difference.
Okay.
So I believe those are the four colors, and I don't remember the order, but apparently there's an order in which you have to paint to make them stand out. So
Ooh, I didn't
I
remember
assume
that.
it's darker to lighter. So I would guess that you would go black, probably red, the orange or yellow, and then the white. Because white's got to be last, because you would just paint over it and you wouldn't see it.
I do not recall.
Yeah. So red and yellow may be swapped, but I'd imagine that's the order. You also see some at the annex. You see some old graffiti because apparently a part of the history is prospectors and miners and railroad builders and things like that. So they've got people that left their names up there. They used torches or old lanterns, kerosene lanterns that had they put off soot and burned, and so that kind of stuff is so old now that the graffiti is actually historical. So it is another type of pictograph, modern, but old enough to be considered historical.
Right, some sort of time capsule.
Yep. So don't go out there and graffiti, but at some point that stuff does become art.
It's making the best out of the worst, I agree, like, it wasn't cool of those people to do graffiti.
Well, I mean, it was a whole different time. It wasn't like a protected site. They were just out there chilling, doing stuff.
I mean, but still, like, to just graffiti anyway.
Yeah.
So it was, interesting. Another thing that was highlighted to us is that, just the amount of resources it took to create these drawings. It wasn't like, "Oh, I'm bored, I'm gonna go and paint, pictographs now." It took time, effort, resources that were very scarce as it was out in this desert environment, and so if you wanted to create a pictograph, it was not a decision you took lightly, and it was, either a sign of devotion and or desperation, because it just took an enormous amount of natural resources that were so scarce to create these paintings, to create the colors, create the paints, etc. And then we don't even know that they used a scaffold. Like, how did they get up there? Especially those drawings in the annex. We don't know.
So after getting warmed up at the annex, you'll actually take some stairs up to Fate Bell Shelter itself. They have mats laid on the ground, and it's quite a bit of ways up. It'll be multiple feet up. And they have mats laid out, and that's the only area you can walk on because they don't want you destroying any artifacts or anything that may be under the soil.
Right. It's still a live excavation site.
Yeah. And so you're so raised up apparently because a lot of it is burned rock middens or a fancy way to say ovens. So they just take these rocks, get them real hot, and they cover them up. And that's how they cook the agave and sotol. And so it's just piled up and piled up. So you make these earthen ovens, with hot rocks, and you just keep, as they get hot, the rocks break, and then you have to get new rocks. And so that's what all this dirt is created from, these broken up and broken rocks. And so that's what these large mounds are actually created from, is just where they lived and having these ovens all around them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool as you're walking up, to see these pictographs. You see literally like a timeline of ovens, as you're going, and it's just different. They were like, "Oh, somebody just used that spot on the right. I'm gonna use another oven to the left." I don't know. That's what it looked like to
Mm.
me. Like, hundreds, if not thousands, of uses as of ovens have been recorded in the site, and it's just so interesting to see. kind of like that life history right in front of you. Really great side. You get to see a lot of the paintings really close, and it's just really surreal to be seeing them so close. You can't touch. You can only see.
Yeah. And so you'll take a path down. There'll be multiple, pieces of art similar to the annex, and you'll get close. But you end at the very end, which is appears to be a ceremony. If you look closely, there's 5 people in it.
It's Pecos River style, all of these.
Yeah.
That's
So
what it's known as.
this entire art style is the Pecos style.
Yeah, and like Jarrett was saying, you end at the Fate Bell, shelter, you end with that and that ceremonial with that ceremonial piece. It
Mhm.
literally is a piece of, like, seeming to describe a ceremony. Do you remember the details, Jared?
No,
What
I
else they
mean they
told us
don't
about it?
they don't really assign much meaning to these because they're not sure because it's kind of a foreign concept and there's not a whole lot to relate to. But one of the interesting stuff for the time, there's 5 individuals. As I said earlier, some of them are hidden, but their feet are aimed in different directions, which implies that they're facing and that there is a perspective to this painting. And so from the time, there isn't a whole lot of other art in that era, even in Europe, the Middle East, that provides a perspective or has individuals facing in different directions.
Yeah, they I believe they believe the intent is that these characters be facing each other,
hmm
and but also the viewer is looking at them from, a specific angle as they're looking at each other.
Yeah. So if that's true, it's kind of a one of a time art piece, and definitely ahead of its time as far as the drawing style and some of the techniques used. So that makes it really neat, and I think we're seeing just based on that alone, other than pictographs are a great thing to connect with prehistoric history here in the U.S.
For sure.
Yeah. So at that, you'll spend the most time there. People have a ton of questions. They'll walk you through kind of a Q&A session and give you their thoughts on it. And that'll be essentially the end of the Fate Bell tour.
Right, and then, you'll take your walk back. That's the hard part that some people, had some struggles with, considering it was late July,
hmm
and, it was around 11:30 at this point when we were heading up.
Yeah, maybe 11:30, 12.
Yeah, and so you have to go up and, make it all the way back up to the museum. Um, in the museum, it's a nice relief, frankly, during the summer. I'm sure if it's cold during the winter too. You go in there and you can take a brief or relief from the heat, the weather, and then take your time to explore the park, the museum itself. Like, it gives you a good overview of the people that lived there, what their lives were like. For example, you learn that they had to travel and basically operate in small family units. They couldn't operate as large groups because just of um, how scarce all the resources were. So it's hard to sustain a large group if you have very limited resources. So the locals would, stick to local family units. And you learn neat things like that about the harsh living conditions of the area and how the survivors survived.
And then while Linda was looking at the museum, had enough time to do a short trail, which is the Windmill Nature Trail. It's a half mile one way, but you got to come back because it's not a loop. It doesn't connect to anything other than the road to get out or to come in. So it takes you, uh, partway through the Fate Bell Pictograph Trail, but it cuts you off and sends you up another canyon. So you get some different views of the actual, canyon. It takes you around to see a springs there. It actually has, quite a decent sized pool. It's a mini oasis, so it's a neat thing to do. It's a lot more humid in that area in the summer, even though everywhere else is pretty dry. So that was kind of refreshing, and you can walk down to it. I don't know that I would get into it, but it's nice to stop and look at. And then at the very end of that trail is, in fact, a windmill and an old cistern, so it's got water in it if you actually cross the park road. Then I came back real quick and I took my time, looking in the museum as well before we left.
So before we wrap up, I don't know if we've mentioned this enough, but another a last item you might want to do is consider camping out there. Out at Seminole Canyon State Park, West Texas has some of the most amazing night skies that we've seen. So this park is definitely one of the places to do that at. And now we can actually wrap up our tour of Seminole Canyon State Park. We highly recommend you visit. If you'd like to learn more about our adventures there or at any other place, make sure to follow us at Adventures with BG on Instagram and Facebook.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you follow us and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast and give us a 5-star review. It's really going to help us grow and get more listeners.
And as always, stay safe as you wander into the woods.